For more than a year, Black Enterprise has reported on the rising number of corporate commitments focused on bolstering Black-owned businesses. These initiatives were in response to the devastating effects of the pandemic, as well as the deleterious impact of racial inequities. Addressing these issues requires great urgency, and one of the prime areas is supplier diversity. Hi, I'm Derek T. Dingle, Executive Vice President and Chief Content Officer of Black Enterprise, and I will serve as the moderator for this vital session. Procurement equity, get your slice of the pie. Our intent to enable entrepreneurs like you to gain access to lucrative business building corporate contracts. We will talk with experts aligned with some of the nation's leading business diversity and development programs. The topics will range from positioning your firm to secure procurement opportunities to placing your company on track to become a prime contractor. Our top flight panel to discuss the dynamics of corporate procurement in today's environment includes Didi Anekwe, Supplier Diversity Development Manager at Nationwide, Kevin Williams, Director, Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at American Airlines, and Ebony Bell, Senior Director, Business Development for the ActOne Group, one of the nation's largest Black businesses and a leading supplier for IBM, among other major companies. Didi, Kevin, Ebony, thank you for joining us for this very special session on supplier diversity. It's been we call this session Procurement Equity, and that was intentional because we've looked at the last year. There's been a number of corporate commitments tied to bolstering Black business, and one of the areas that has been a primary focus has been supplier diversity, business diversity, getting more African-American owned businesses, contracts. So my first question to all of you, and I'm going to start with Didi, is share with us, it's been roughly a year since we've had the corporate commitments, the investments. Share with me how you frame the current environment in terms of related to Black business and corporate investment, and how has that impacted Nationwide's supplier diversity program?
First of all, thank you, Derek, for the invitation. It's good to be with Black Enterprise magazine. The activities of the last 18 months, it really did not change significantly Nationwide's supply diversity program. If anything, it emphasized that what we are doing is actually on the right track. But as a result of the activities of the last 18 months, we have decided to put more fuel to the engine, so to say. We have leaned on our tier 1 suppliers to do more with their tier 2 programs. We are constantly looking at the low-hanging fruits. We are leaning on our business units to be a whole lot more sensitive to the whole concept of supply diversity. But I think more than all of that, supply diversity is baked into the overall strategy of Nationwide. So even though the last 18 months has been kind of traumatic, for Nationwide, it remains, how should I put it, business as usual, but we are paying particular attention to our spend because we know the economic impact of supply diversity.
Kevin, I'm going to go to you next, and I wanted to ask you the same question. How has the past year, the renewed focus on DEI, the corporate commitments as it relates specifically to business, how that impacted supplier diversity at American, and how has it changed the program? How has it altered the program? How has it helped drive more businesses to gain contracts, specifically Black-owned businesses?
Thanks, Derek. Really appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to be here to speak on the panel. So the past 18 months at American Airlines has really caused us to take an introspective look really at all of our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And supplier diversity is no stranger to that and something that we took a look at as well. I would say kind of to Didi's point, we've always had kind of a robust supplier diversity program, but I think over the last 18 months, we've now done a double click to really go deeper on really kind of being more detailed about the categories of spend and where we're actually kind of spending those dollars, right? And so when I think about, looking at beyond people of color to say, what are we spending in the Black community? It's something that we've been more intentional about to understand what is our spend within the Black community and what are things that we need to do to help increase that. And so, we are really focused this year on creating access and providing access to entrepreneurs and businesses that want to do business with us here at American, but also as well using platforms to educate around what it takes to do business at American. We know sometimes, being a large organization of ours, sometimes that process can be a little daunting. And so we're looking at, how can we look at our processes, look at our procedures, and make it easier to do business with us, and then again, educate around those things. And then lastly, I will say it really is about kind of how are we, really being more intentional about that measurement of spend and now setting goals. And so, as we look to 2022 and beyond, we're looking to say, what are goals that we want to set to really hold ourselves accountable to ensure that we are supporting diverse communities from a supplier perspective, but specifically the Black community at large.
Okay, well, thank you, Kevin. Well, now I want to get the supplier's perspective. Ebony, you are the Senior Director of Business Development for ActOne, one of the nation's largest Black-owned firms, one of the nation's largest workforce management firms. And obviously it's run by, a entrepreneur that has been on the pages and on our website for years, Janice Bryant Howroyd. Give me your view as someone that's engaged in business development, how the past year has impacted your business as a supplier, and in terms of business development, have you seen a growth in business development?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Derek, and I appreciate you inviting us to be on this panel. When we look at supplier diversity and the engagement of suppliers over time, and in the recent, I want to say the recent explosion of, targeting diverse populations, especially African Americans. This is something that has always, been embedded in our organization at the ActOne Group from Janice Bryant Howroyd. And we can look at it two ways. From a supplier, those relationships that we've been developing with corporations and spending time and learning about their organization, we've been called upon, to say, hey, some corporations that we're working with are saying, we want to shift things a little bit. What does second tier look like? And because we're such a large organization, all things procurement that has to do with workforce. We can work strategically with, those clients or prospects to say, we are tier one, woman-owned, African-American-owned organization. However, we have a very robust internal supplier program where we count, we help you track, we follow those dollars within the community, and we can report that back to you of how much of your spend went to, the communities that you serve. So we've seen an uptick on the collaboration of how do we make this work? How do we engage suppliers? How do we engage suppliers, not only on second tier, but third tier and track it. And that's what we have been doing with a lot of our clients through this time.
If you can, share with me that experience and that focus as it relates to IBM. Share that as sort of a case study in terms of, impact, in terms of collaboration, and
absolutely. So I've known Michael Robinson from IBM for many years. In my past life, I used to work for NMSDC, the local chapter of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware for 10 years. And the corporations were my baby to help them procure. I'm a certified supplier diversity professional. So joining ActOne Group 9 years ago and being on the other side, I had a really good appreciation for the development and the time it takes to develop those relationships. We've had several conversations over many years of what's the right fit to engage ActOne. There has been times when we said, you know what, that's not a good fit, or having that collaboration, because it's not easy to do business with IBM, right? And you have to understand where you're going to make that impact. You got to understand how their business works, and it takes time to learn that. So, I know many suppliers think, hey, I go get certified, I meet these supplier diversity or procurement professionals, and we're going to talk about how we can contract with them. But, it's more to that, right? It's developing that trust, bring ideas and solutions to the table that they necessarily didn't ask you for, but you developed that roadmap for them because you followed their organization. You understand how they're moving. You understand the conversations that you previously had and reviewed it over and over to say, you know what, I think this is the right fit. And I can say, I believe that's what happened with IBM. It was the right time over many presentations to many different business units. And when all moons aligned and we strategically, looked at what that roadmap would be for ActOne Group and in the partnership with IBM, then that's when we executed. And I can say we executed a few months ago. And, this journey has been over time and not immediate.
Okay. Well, Kevin, I'm going to ask you this, and then I'm going to go to Didi. I'm going to look at, supplier diversity as it relates to America in a different way. So many of the suppliers gain contracts from your prime contractors, from your tier one contractors. In terms of, and American as well as nationwide, always been in the forefront of supplier diversity, always have gotten top marks. Even when we've developed the list, you've gotten top marks in that. How do you ensure that your prime contractors have the same focus on, supplier diversity, in terms of nurturing these businesses, in terms of investment in these businesses, as, say, American does or Nationwide does? Is that a requirement to be a prime contractor, that you follow, the path that American has set or Nationwide has set in terms of their in terms of your respective supplier diversity programs?
Thanks, Derek. And that's a great question. So, it really comes down to accountability, and really how are we holding our suppliers, especially our top tiered suppliers, accountable to really what we value and what we believe here at American Airlines. And so to answer your question directly, it's not a requirement now, but it will be. So as we've looked through kind of this last 18 months, as we talked about before, and really what are some of the things that really had an impact on us, that was one of the things that we really took a deep look at to say, if we're really serious about this and it's important to us, we need to make sure the folks that we're doing business with, it's important to them as well, and they align with our values and what we believe in is important from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. So we're currently working to what those standards will look like, how we will hold our suppliers accountable, and kind of what that process is for us to gather that information, and what to do kind of the repercussions look like if folks do not, or if those suppliers do not kind of meet up to the standards that we set. So, that's a journey that we, in the past, we hadn't embarked on, but we're embarking on now, because we understand, again, that accountability is going to be necessary. And especially for our top 50 suppliers, it is very important for us to ensure that they are aligned to the mission, the values, and the goals of American Airlines.
So, Didi, how do you ensure the accountability of your prime contractors so that it, walks the walk, the same nationwide walk, that they're on the side of Black business the way that you are?
So true, Derek. I can articulate two things right away. One is we do have a tier 2 program. And for the tier 2 program, we target our tier 1s or the primes. When I started, we limited the number of tier 1s that we survey for tier 2 spend. We capped it at 44. We've increased it to 100, meaning that we've doubled the responsibility. And last year, for instance, our tier 2 spend was close to $50 million on top of almost $200 million that we spent. So that is forcing tier 2 suppliers to sit up. The other thing that we do, and I think we're one of the few corporations that's actually doing it, in our MSA, there is a specific language that talks about quarterly reporting of your tier 2 spend to nationwide. And we monitor that. It helps us ensure that these suppliers align with our strategies, our vision, to actually make sure that they are actually on the side of tier 2 suppliers. So those are two critical things, that we do currently. But I also think, Derek, more than all of those, we have a CEO and his leadership team that actually starts from the top to make sure that business units speak that language. Those business units who deal with their tier 1 or prime suppliers, they're beginning to kind of whisper in their ears that the environment has changed. You really have to reach out and pull the smaller, diverse corporations.
So that's an interesting focus, because as leaders nationwide, and American Airlines has to not only, I feel, and this has been comments from others, not only drive their prime contractors but their industries. But as you, Ebony, look at ActOne, what is the role that ActOne plays with its suppliers and moving, diverse suppliers forward? And how do you use your influence as one of the major contractors, one that has gained great reputation and great influence, to further drive the supplier diversity within the companies that you serve and their prime contractors?
Yeah. So, ActOne Group as a whole, when we're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, we manage over 2,500 staffing suppliers when we look at our MSP and VMS programs. We work with each one of our clients to understand what their goal and their mission is. We will benchmark that, and we will make sure that, diversity and inclusion is at the top, because once you do business with us, that is tier 1, but we have a responsibility to build, to mentor other staffing suppliers. I can give you a quick story of, we were implementing a new program for MSP VMS, and we had a supplier that was very hesitant on joining, right, the program and being a staffing supplier. This supplier did so well that we have leveraged to move suppliers throughout our different programs to actually grow them. Every year we have an awards program. We bring to our corporate summit of our clients every year the staffing suppliers that support us, so they can meet the client, they can understand it's, who's supporting them. And we actually do an awards ceremony for the suppliers. That one supplier that was hesitant, maybe was doing upwards, maybe $500,000 a year. They are a multi-million-dollar staffing supplier and a diverse supplier within our organization to service the clients that we have. We have a very strong commitment around building, right? And seeing those dollars flow and so that they can begin to impact. And we follow and we track and we sit on boards of diversity and inclusion. One of our clients is University of Penn. We're on the affirmative action, right, board of directors to engage and create change so that those things will definitely take place while we're engaged and partnered with our corporations.
So part of this session, the title was Procurement Equity. The second part of it was, how to get your slice of the pie. So in terms of getting your slice of the pie, how should suppliers access your companies? Ebony, you have experience with IBM and some of the major companies throughout the country and the world. Obviously, American and nationwide are looking for suppliers that will not only that are not only diverse but are additive in terms of innovation, in terms of excellence, in terms of ensuring that you have qualitative products. Tell me how an entrepreneur out there, among our audience, can get their slice of the pie, how they can get within your company, gain attention, and once they're in, grow beyond just being a supplier, but to a corporate partner. And I'm going to start with Ebony, then I'm going to go to Didi, and then Kevin.
Sure. One thing that I would take away for suppliers, even with Didi and Nationwide, we've had some of the best conversations over the last couple of years, months about what's going on in Nationwide. What's the great opportunity? What solutions look like? You have to keep your communication open. There may not be an opportunity for you immediately, but make sure while you are engaging those corporations, make sure you do your homework. Make sure you understand they're buying the product that you sell or the services you sell, right? Make sure that there's a need and what problem are you solving? What makes you different from the next person that's selling the same goods or services? When you look at ActOne Group as a company, and if they're staffing suppliers that they want to engage with us, reach out to us. We have a GSS team that manages all the suppliers. Make sure you bring to the table what makes you different, what's your strong points, what solutions you bring to the table. And again, it's about the relationship and keeping us abreast of the things that are happening within your organization, right? Any wins that you're having, any innovation solutions. I cannot stress that enough because, corporations have tons of suppliers. That's not the issue. The issue is they have tons of problems and you have to be a problem solver. Those are the type of things that we would ask for suppliers to engage us with, something that's new, innovative, that maybe has not been done before. And, a lot of suppliers are hesitant to bring new ideas to the table, but that's how great ideas are born. You have to have that conversation. You got to say, you know what I was thinking? What if? And, possibly if you have a great partner within the corporation or person that you're looking to engage, you can work that out together and come out with a great outcome. Sometimes it doesn't work, but you have to be able to be confident enough to go out there and figure it out and do your homework.
So you have to be bold.
Yes, very.
So Didi, I'm a bold entrepreneur. How do I approach you to get into Nationwide?
First of all, you've got to make sure that your foundation is solid. Okay. Capability statement, certification, references, that's foundational for me. Okay. If you don't have those things, if you've not made those basic investments in your corporation, then We really don't have a whole lot to talk about until you take care of those, unless you want to get on the track of a small business as opposed to diverse business. That's one approach. The other thing I want you to understand is that this is a process. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. I once had an opportunity to have a conversation with Javier, Mr. Javier, when he was the president CEO of United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And he articulated for me the process. It involves 3 A's. The first A, we've got to create awareness. I've got to know who you are, who I am, what am I looking for, what are you selling, how long have you been in business, what's your reputation in the industry. If we are successful there, then we'll graduate to affinity. There's got to be some common denominators that we have. Even though it doesn't have to be friendship. At least let me understand your moral principles, things along those lines. If we are successful there, then we'll graduate to the last A, which is the action. If we have RFPs, things along those lines, even though the cost of having an RFP does not guarantee you an action. So there is that process. The other element I'm going to throw out to you is this. Have you thought about creating a consortium with like-minded suppliers? There is an organization out there called Titanium Worldwide. Very creative. It's based out of New York. This is diverse certified suppliers, all in media, marketing, communications. They came together, pooled their resources together. So instead of one individual coming to me with, say, $20 million revenues, the consortium comes to me with $600 million in sales. So you got to have your foundation, do your research about Nationwide. I've had the pleasure and displeasure of sitting down with suppliers who ask me, what does Nationwide do? And I had to take a deep breath, to continue the conversation. So preparation is very, very critical. Understanding what we do, understanding our solutions. Nationwide, for instance, we are not limited to insurance solutions. We are the #1 solution provider for public employees who have 401k accounts, the equivalent of 401k in the private sector. We have the largest pet insurance out there. Know these things. If you have any white papers to help me solve problems, bring all of those to the table. In other words, come prepared. Everything that I've just talked about gives you entrance to the dinner. But where you sit at the table, what you consume is dependent on subsequent conversations.
So Kevin, I'd like to piggyback on what Didi talked about in the context of the question. So many companies have over the years consolidated their contracts. So being a small company, you may be sort of pushed aside, or many entrepreneurs have told me that they felt that way. And the whole concept of consolidation was interesting. And there's a need to engage in capacity building, to engage in, scaling up. In that process, how involved is American in helping suppliers who have gotten into the system get to a point where they can scale up, get to a point where they can engage in larger contracts? Or is that pretty much on the supplier to push that forward?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And we recognize and understand, especially with a company of our size, that, scale is important, but we have to really figure out avenues and ways that we help, smaller business, entrepreneurs, things of that nature really scale up. And so that's really one of our primary focuses going forward too, as we really look to diversify and continue to diversify, I should say, from a supplier perspective, is really thinking about how do we create that access, and also too, how do we mentor suppliers along the way. So we are starting a formalized mentorship program. We've done this in the past, right? We've worked with the NMSDC. We've done things in the past from a mentoring perspective, but we're going to launch an internal mentoring program that really helps bring suppliers along the journey. I think, to Didi's point, it is a process, right? And we understand that it's a process. And so how can we help ensure that folks understand kind of the tools that are needed and what that process is and how we help guide folks through that process. Also as well, it really is, we see it as our responsibility in some cases to help scale. So we have some recent examples where we were able to secure, business with Black-owned businesses. And from that, we were able to help them scale their business, then to support, food and beverage that will be featured on each one of our domestic flights in the near future, right? And so those are the things that we are working on to say, if you have the product and the services that fit within our business model, we believe that you'll be able to service us or our customers in a very effective way. Then we're looking at what are ways that we can do to help and support you as a business to really bring that business onto American Airlines.
Okay, well, I know that we're really tight on time. This has been a fantastic conversation, but before you go, I need you to provide the entrepreneurs out there with each of you 2 tips that they should take away from this conversation so that they can ensure that they have staying power as a supplier and they can grow as a supplier to have multiple clients. I'm going to start with Kevin, Didi, and then Ebony. We're going to wrap it up with you.
Yeah, so I will say my couple tips are, for one, being persistent. I think that was been talked about earlier by some of the other panelists, but being persistent and creating those opportunities to network and have those conversations early on. It may not result in something today, but who knows what may happen in the future. And so being persistent through that. I would just like to say, you can always go out to our website, aa.com/supplier diversity, or send us an email at supplierdiversity@aa.com to really gain more information about what it takes to be a supplier with us at American. And then the other tip that I will say is ensuring that you do have those foundational pieces that Didi spoke about, and understanding that it is a process, but we are here to help and support you through that process.
Okay, Didi?
I'm scheduled for one-on-one meetings, a matchmaker. So there's that opportunity there for them to connect with me and find out a little bit more. But I'm going to kind of anchor my statement on what Kevin has said. There's got to be patience. You've got to be persistent. If you've gotten 7 no's, try the 8th time. That might be a yes. Try to partner with like-minded suppliers so that we can increase your scale, okay? And then be proactive with your supply diversity professionals. Stay in touch with me at least once a quarter. If there are any cutting-edge solutions out there, send it to me. But otherwise, remain patient, remain focused, do your research, make sure your foundation is solid.
Okay. Ebony?
Yeah, so thank you. The first tip that I have for suppliers would be persistent. And when I say be persistent, be purposeful, but persistent. The companies that you're engaging or trying to get in front of have hundreds of suppliers reaching out to them via email, be it phone, the time when we could drop by and say hello. But you need to understand that relationship is going to take time, and you always have to be prepared for that call, because more times than not, when you get that phone call from that company you've been pursuing, they need you to act and act fast. So be prepared to be able to engage, be able to provide what they're looking for in a timely manner, and do not ask for extensions. The second thing I would say is that, you need to have your house in order. And when I say have your house in order, to the point someone else said on the panel, have your references, have examples, have white papers, have case studies on the expertise of your organization and how you will be able to create an impact within their organization. You just don't want to be a supplier. You want to be a partner. And I think if you look at it, I want to be your partner to move forward and grow together, then your outcome will be totally different than you signing up in a portal and just saying, hey, well, I am a supplier, but I don't have any substantial business, right, that I can speak of or look at that hit my roles. You want to be a partner to the organizations you're engaging.
Wow, this has been great. So what I've gotten from this are 5 Ps: be prepared, be persistent, be purposeful, also, perform at your highest level so you can eventually become a partner. So this has been a fantastic session. We must have a sequel so that we can bring you back and talk about this further. But thank you for being a part of our Entrepreneur Summit and providing the real useful nuggets of information to our entrepreneurial audience. I'm sure that you're going to help them get on the path to being a supplier for a major company and then eventually growing to be a tier 1 supplier in the future. So thank you, Ebony, Didi, and Kevin, for being a part of this session.